I will be introducing what we do in the realms of Kafka as I go. Now, we said save the questions for last, but this session will probably be a little bit different to other sessions that you have attended so far at Confluent. Well, I hope so, at least, because it will be definitely a little bit different from myself, because we will do it very interactively. So to kind of kick us off with an icebreaker and try out if this engaging thing will actually work, I want you all to take up your phones and try to scan any of those two QR codes that you're seeing right here. And we're going to have a little bit of a back and forth as we go through this entire presentation. But just to, and I know that someone pointed out to me that UK is not here, so apologies for, I don't know why I picked a world map without UK. I swear, actually, when I look at it, I'm not sure if it's actually representing half of the countries of the world. But just to kind of see where people have flown in from would be very fun to see where people are joining in from today. And you can keep this app open or the website open on a mobile phone. So we will be doing a back and forth in terms of questions as we go in this session. So a lot of people joining us from the US, not unsurprisingly. Quite a few people quite closely. So one person in Europe so far only, maybe because I left a couple of countries in Europe out. Maybe that's why. I think Sean, for example, apologies for not having you there. Okay, so what are we going to do in this session? So first of all, I'm going to be introducing platform engineering and platform engineering teams, why those exist and what responsibilities those teams have. I'm going to look at how Kafka fits into platform engineering and what role Kafka plays there and what platform engineering teams have to kind of consider. And then I'm going to introduce something called Kafka-as-APIs program. So we're going to talk about, oh no, we're going to talk about what that is. I'm not sure how I will correct that, but let's see. What it is and the value of Kafka-as-APIs as a program. We're going to look at a success story from one of the customers that we work with, which is a leading US sports league that have implemented Kafka-as-APIs program and the value that they're getting. Now, before we get there, I was going to make a Gartner quote here about platform engineering, but then I went kind of short on time, so I wouldn't have time to get approval for Gartner to use that quote. So instead, I'm going to let you kind of quote it for me. So according to Gartner, what is the percentages of organizations they believe will be having established platform engineering teams by 2026? We can see a lot of distributed answers here coming in. For some reason, none around 40% for some reason. I will not kind of wait too long before I announce the answer here. It's around 80% of organizations that Gartner believes in just 2 years' time will be having platform engineering teams. So what is platform engineering? Well, platform engineering and the teams that are implementing it is there basically to create and maintain an internal developer portal to streamline software development, enabling developers to deliver software quickly and reliably. So some of the key responsibilities that platform engineering teams have include building and maintaining such an internal developer portal. We're going to talk about the values of that internal developer portal. But basically, the use case is for developers to much more fast get onboarded when you're joining a company. Getting access to your tools, processes, systems that you are needing to have in order for you to be productive as a developer. The responsibility of that team is also to automate infrastructure, provisioning, use typically infrastructure as code to have as much repeatable, automated processes as possible to generate, for example, Kubernetes clusters or Kafka brokers to developers to quickly get productive and building applications. And it's very much about this enhancing the developer experience, making it easy for developers to understand what they can do, examples of how to use different tools, whether that is Jira or Splunk or Datadog for observability, or seeing the process of their CI/CD pipelines running through, or which topics and Kafka brokers that they have access to, for example. Making it easy to get access to different capabilities. So security monitoring is also something that platform engineering teams help by selecting secure tools that are aligning and complying to the company's standards, as well as having observability and capabilities and guardrails in the organization to help developers make sure that all the tools that they pick and all the processes that they engage in are kind of approved of a central team. And obviously, as the platform engineering team kind of sets the sort of tooling to use, the sort of infrastructure to use, they obviously have to care about optimizing for cost and scalability as this is rolled out as well. So some of you may be already working in organizations, maybe you already work in teams that are platform engineering teams, or you're consumers of those teams. If you have experience with platform engineering, it would be great to see how you would rate those different benefits that I'm outlining right here. So better developer experience talks to the fact about how quickly can developers be onboarded and how much more efficient can developers be if they have an internal developer portal that they can consume from. And almost as a sub-product of that is the faster time to market. So if you have platform engineering teams that enable your developers to get this very quick provisioning, for example, is it something that will be benefiting the organization to go faster time to market? A lot of people here, I see, vote for better consistency and reliability in the fact that it's pre-approved tools and workflows that the platform engineering teams are enabling for developers. So that's what the crowd here seems to think is the most important thing. And then on third place, I guess, at this moment is the enhanced security and compliance. So it looks like the whole crowd actually knows and understands platform engineering. So that's great. So that probably will allow us to kind of go into what Kafka means for platform engineering much faster. So if you look at platform engineering from an organizational value perspective, so again, an platform engineering team typically provides the platform, the infrastructure, the tooling that developers can be productive with. And that's obviously part of the value here, that the product engineering teams very easily get access to tools in an automated way and also get infrastructure provision for themselves. Just as a raise of hands here, we're combining that a little bit with the interactive phone thing. How many people are actually engaging with an internal developer portal for developers provided by a platform engineering team today? So probably 4 or 5 hands I see here actually, so not a lot. Internal developer portal, some of you might have come across technologies like Backstage, for example, that Spotify created. Basically tooling that platform engineering teams use to build self-service interfaces for developers to get access to all of their tools and workflows that they need to be productive effectively. And again, that's helping engineering teams. The value that they get is they get be able to discover in a self-service way the different tools that they need and access control to what they are allowed to use based on what role they have in the organization and what team they work in, for example. But ultimately, there's also other benefits of platform engineering, right? As an end customer of an organization, it's very likely that because of the improved time to market, that you're going to get features and bug fixes much faster than if there wasn't a platform engineering team behind it effectively, because that engineering team can produce things much quicker. It's also more likely that the platform is more reliable because it's run by a platform that has pre-approved and tested and hardened platforms and frameworks that developers build upon. So the end customer typically gets also value from the fact that it's a proven platform, it's reliable, and it's scalable. So before we look at Kafka here, just curious to understand in your organizations today, what teams are actually managing and governing Kafka? Is it that platform engineering team as part of that platform that they build? Is that dedicated event team? Maybe it's a dedicated API team. Or maybe there's actually no one in the organization that is actually owning and governing and providing Kafka. Maybe it's something that sits on the shelf of some of the teams, but it's kind of like a Wild West situation. So we can see here, again, with the audience, that answer that everyone is comfortable with platform engineering. I can imagine there's quite a few platform engineering teams in the room potentially. So that seems to be the #1 team. Actually, I'll get rid of this little QR code here through my phone, so we can actually see the whole pie chart. So we can see platform engineering team is definitely the most popular team there, followed by that there's no governance and no central team that owns this. And I think third place here we have the API team, actually, that is owning the platform. Very few people here, interestingly, has an event team that is just dedicated to the event-driven architecture. Okay, so what about Kafka? So what we see at Gravity is a lot of organizations, obviously, as we've just proved, have platform engineering teams that have an event broker platform, i.e. Kafka, Confluent, Red Panda, whatever it might be, that is part of this platform engineering team's responsibility. Some of them, and we concluded here in this audience, that only a handful of you actually engage or have the ability in the organization to work with an internal developer portals like Backstage, but some do. And here's the concept of event portal and self-service for topics and clusters kind of come into play in terms of Kafka. Now, for the customer, though, what we see at Gravity is it's fairly rare that the end customer is benefiting from the Kafka platform. Now, obviously, Kafka in a lot of organizations is being used for real-time analytics and data understanding internally, but quite rarely would you say that a customer is benefiting in real time for that Kafka data. So what we see a lot of people doing is implementing this concept of Kafka products and Kafka-as-APIs, which is kind of the top level here, basically, giving the same benefits that the internal teams are getting for self-service, for discovery, for access control of Kafka, for clusters, topics, etc., to end customers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what that means and some bottlenecks that, or roadblocks that stop you sometimes from doing that, and some examples of the value you can get if you achieve it. Before we do that, I just wanted to kind of see here with this audience, and obviously there's always options here like I don't know, for example, but it'd be interesting to see with audience, how does your customers, that could be customers outside, could still be internal customers, but outside of the network or outside of your parameter, or it could be partners, B2B partners, B2C, it could be customers as well. Is it something that is being actually used and consumed by your customers, or is it mainly an internal tool? So we can see here that it's kind of an even split so far, actually, of some people that are not using Kafka at all for external audiences. Some that do, but they do it through APIs and file-based integration. Maybe you have a REST API or an SFTP server, something like that. It's kind of the intermediary between your customer and your Kafka users. But also, on second here, we have that you actually expose Kafka to customers where they can use a Kafka client to access the broker. So quite a distributed range of answers there. So what are some key pillars, regardless of you exposing that through APIs or regardless of you exposing that natively with the Kafka protocol to your end user and customer and partner? What are some key pillars for building those programs out to actually drive business value? So one of them is the Kafka Developer Experience. So for those developers that are getting access to your Kafka, to your topics, to your streams, one of the things that we see a lot is the ability to offer flexibility in the protocols that are being used. Some customers of yours might want to get native access to your Kafka broker. Some might be more comfortable working with things like WebSocket or Webhook or server-side events to build applications on top of the data. But self-service is very important, the ability to understand what events are available to me. As a customer, what events are there? What is the documentation? What are the use cases? How do I get actually access to them? And then, of course, standards are important. So Gravity, I'm going to come to that later, we very much come from a background of API management, where things like OpenAPI and those standards are very, very set in stone. I'm lucky I don't have a weird background. And the same is obviously true for event-driven APIs and topics, right? We're talking about schemas, we're talking about async API, cloud events, JSON, Average protobuf, and so forth, giving that to the developer in terms of understanding how they are using the services. The second one is security and compliance. Now, if you build a Kafka-as-APIs program, it's likely that you either have internal customers or partners or external customers that are wanting access to your data. So security and compliance is very, very important, ensuring that you have very, very granular access control to whoever is consuming or producing data into your Kafka, with clear approvals from your internal teams in terms of which customers and which applications is getting access to what data. Maybe you're enforcing strong control. Maybe that is rate limiting or controlling who can create topics, view topics. Maybe it's about masking certain fields or certain topics entirely for certain customers or audiences. And then, of course, governance, to be able to see, after you've exposed this data, to understand who is using what. Do we have an approval flow for subscriptions to different topics and the ACLs? Is there a way to view lineage and topology to understand what applications are actually subscribed to what topics? Is also a very, very important thing, especially when you expose data outside of your network in terms of Kafka. But Kafka's an APIs program. The most important thing is that you are able to recognize some business outcome. Whether that is building a better customer experience where they can get access to real-time data for you to provide new services and new revenue streams for end customers or partners to build new applications and capabilities. Obviously, analytics is important. Understanding my customers that are accessing my Kafka data, are they successful? Are we performant? Do we have a big consumer lag we have to look at for some applications, for example? Is it being adopted as well as we had envisioned? and having a program and a way for people to easily give feedback. Is it maybe in a developer portal or through email or whatever it might be, but a way to actually have feedback loop for your Kafka topics for external audiences. And what we see a lot is for internal teams that are exposing Kafka to other teams internally, it's very common with things like chargebacks models, for example, to ensure that the value that you have in your Kafka and the infrastructure that you spend on your Kafka has some sort of chargeback mechanisms that other teams are able to obviously pay for the data that they use. And of course, what we see a lot is when this is exposed to external customers, organizations often want to have some sort of monetization on top of that. Sometimes it's just to provide a better customer experience with real-time experiences, but sometimes it's actually about making more money directly by exposing data in a way that the customers really, really, really want. Now, what we see is a lot of organizations are not there, basically. We can see here that quite a few of you are exposing data externally, but there's a lot of people that have some blockers of doing so. So some of this stuff could be, for example, that there's no platform or tool to really help them with this in terms of the governance and security and access control. For some, it's about the compliance and the risk that, I'm actually taking my Kafka broker here and I'm getting access to my customer over here, and that's a little bit risky maybe. I need to have the control, I need to have the safety, I have to have the guardrails in place, and that's sometimes what's holding people back. And sometimes it's about the control and governance. The ability to very granularly control who exactly is allowed to access what topics, what data in those topics, what parts of the schemas, in what circumstances can customers and partners interact with my data, and that's also sometimes an issue. But yeah, I can see tools and platform is quite often an issue for organizations. So one of our customers that have been quite successful with implementing a program like this is, as I kind of hinted in the agenda, a very large sports league here in the United States. Now, their business struggled, as I'm sure a lot of businesses during COVID. But as a sports association, obviously ticket revenue is a massive source of revenue for a sports league. And that really struggled under 2019 and 2020 and 2021. Now, in their situation, they're having a quite unique business model where every game has, for every player, a microchip in the jersey that streams data to a Kafka cluster that holds information about the location of the player on the pitch or the court or whatever it's called, the health metrics, the performance stats, etc. A lot of real-time data that is very, very valuable locked into Kafka. Now, a lot of their customers, the franchise teams for the sport, betting agencies, etc., need that data in real time to be able to, for example, make real-time bet updates and build new products for their customers or do player analysis, for example. But historically, they couldn't get that data, so they built this Kafka-as-API program where developers have a self-service way to get access. So traditionally, those developers were used to coming into a developer portal for APIs and subscribe to a REST API, but that didn't exist before they built this Kafka-as-API program for their Kafka events effectively. So with documentation, using things like async API, etc., the ability for those developers to kind of choose, maybe not all of our partners and customers have the ability or wants to work natively on a Kafka protocol. So what about using things like WebSocket or service and events for streaming data into mobile applications for real-time player analysis, for example? And the control and governance was also incredibly important for them to get right, in the sense that every game that is being played has their own topic. And some teams and some betting partners might have different sort of access to that, for example. You don't want team A to access data from team B, for example. So topic routing and data access control per topic, very granularly per application, was very important for them to be successful. And ability to really understand what are my customers are using what, so they can charge them back in terms of the usage and the level of capabilities that they have access to. And that's kind of what we help with at Gravity. So Gravity, we're an API and event streams management platform. So we help customers with both traditional APIs as well as event-driven APIs, and in particular Kafka, to build both internal and external programs effectively. So some of our customers, like the franchise I just mentioned, they use capabilities that we call protocol mediation. So they put our gateway in front of the Kafka broker, That gateway then allows them to expose the data using other web protocols like WebSocket and Webhook and other protocols, and then still give them the capabilities in terms of rate limiting, filtering, routing, etc., controlling the offset if some of their customers have missed data over the last day, for example. And then some natively connect on the Kafka protocol. And we have a very cool solution here, which is called the Kafka Gateway, that basically allows customers to apply rate limiting, access control, virtual topics, and other really cool features on top of Kafka, while the client still interacts with the Kafka protocol. And some customers using what we call federation, in particular with Confluent. It basically means that Gravity takes the topics and the schemas from Confluent, creates async APIs, publishes them to a unified developer portal, and then have customers being able to subscribe, and we then provision the access control on the broker based on those subscriptions that are coming through. So that's a little bit of what Gravity do. I think I enabled the Q&A, but it looks like there were no questions coming into the chat. So if there's any questions, I'll let my colleague here work around with the microphone. But that's kind of what I had, so I'll give you some time back. Gravity, we are at booth 311, so super happy to chat with anyone, walk you through what we do in the Kafka space and how we help customers build this Kafka-as-APIs program, and particularly how we help platform engineering to really scale those programs. Thank you.